assailable to put in something about it protecting Caltrans Highway 101.
In that light, I'm wondering if we then would say if we costed it, because we might have to be a rise, if you will, or a level of elevation increase for that levy as a possibility.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that one was built. When we did the restoration of the line at Shelville, we saw that it actually sunk over the years, and I expect this one has also. So yes, we want to restore it. So.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I thought it might help if I could put this program a little bit into perspective, very briefly, which is to say that total for the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund, which is what the fund under which we'd be applying, the high end is about $3 billion total statewide. The so-called Los Angeles Inland Empire Corridor, under the guidelines, could get up to about $1.7 billion of that. The San Diego International Border Corridor could get up to $400 million of that under the guidelines. The San Francisco Bay Central Valley Corridor would be scheduled to get up to $840 million of that. Now, the reason I say that is because what's left is something called a category called Other Corridors, which has a total of $80 million available. And in making determinations about applications, geographic balance is one criterion that's supposed to be looked at. So part of our hope here is that given the geography of the area and that this is for one of the funding categories where there seems to be some flexibility, that we could compete under this category.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm going to take the chair's prerogative. John, did you have anything else to report from the operator standpoint? I didn't mean to cut you short up there, and I know you've got a flight out. So.
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there other questions from the directors here before we get a motion to them?
Quick question, Mr. Chair. And Mitch, my only question is there something more you need from us? I'm wondering from a support standpoint, letters from elected officials, any lobbying efforts in Sacramento?
Yeah, Director Zegert, that's a very good question. As soon as we get this rolling, we recently have had several conference calls with the port. I see Wilson Lacey is here. We've been working with Wilson and David Hall, the Executive Director of the port. They are fortunate and they have a very good advocate in Sacramento that they work with, and they've been very receptive to us kind of piggybacking with their lobbyists in more ways than one, especially given that it's a joint application. And so we hope that through cooperation with the port that we can develop an advocacy plan, and it will involve all of those things.
Thank you.
I'm going to, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually will hate to hear this, but I have a number of other questions. I just directed my questions to John Williams, so I have a number of other ones. First of all, in general, it was very confusing to me to read this because it seemed to talk about a lot of benefits that would only come if we went up the canyon, in other words, completed the whole line. And then, yet on the other hand, it talked about a relatively small investment. And I found that quite troubling in a way. For instance, especially it seemed to say that one of the big benefits was to relieve congestion. Could somebody answer the question of what congestion on this short rail line current congestion are we relieving? Or is that really, are we talking about relief, congestion relief on other parts of the line when the ultimate, if we ever went through the canyon, is that the congestion that we're relieving?
Let me take a stab at the first one because, and then I'll let Mitch and Roy on. I was involved pretty heavily in God knows how many hours of conference calls and a trip up here and a meeting with the four people. We have been very, very careful to make sure that this is a standalone project, and any discussion of congestion has nothing to do with what the ultimate outcome of studies of the canyon would be. I mean, you could read anything into anything that you would like to, but if there's any language in there that's ambiguous, I'm sure staff can clear it up, but we have gone out of our way to look at this as a project of independent utility in the same manner that we looked at the Rush River Division. And we had these conversations at every turn and with almost every word that's in the application to make sure that there's no confusion, that this is not the first step or the second step, anybody that wants to look at it any way they want, and reopening or a justification for reopening the canyon. I can tell you I was involved in that, and I had a very strong opinion on that subject to be consistent. Mitch, you may want to answer that even more, and Angel is here in terms of the input on the actual project application, so let's clear those ambiguities up right now.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I would just point out a practical matter, which is the port is not in a position to apply at this time for funding for their marine terminal, just as we are not prepared to apply for funds for the canyon. So we have a grant program here that potentially helps ports and potentially helps railroads. And we've got a program where there's supposed to be some geographic balance, and we've got an area of the state that's getting none of those funds. So we've had to be creative in attempting to submit an application that makes a case for funding for this part of the state within the framework of what's available to us. And that's what we've done. And we've done it with the hope of getting some state funds to improve the infrastructure up here on the north end of the line and to improve capacity of the port.
You said you were being very careful in the wording, and I would point out then that maybe some editing needs to be done on the first page of the project programming request under project benefits. There's a sentence that says, provide first steps towards a port rail alternative to the Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Oakland ports. I mean, I certainly interpreted that. If this is the first step, you're certainly referring to a subsequent steps. And it was right after that that they, talked about relieving congestion and vehicular air emissions. That certainly led me to believe that the congestion that you're relieving was probably along the whole ultimate line. Again, I'd ask somebody, what is the evidence that we're supplying that there's congestion in this area currently that we're relieving? Because this is a congestion relief bill. And I would think that the CTC would ask that same question.
Yeah, we will have a lot of interaction with the CTC on this application. There's no question about it.
But do we have any studies? Do we have any evidence? What are we going to say?
Well, it's a joint application. I don't know. Wilson, do you want to respond to any part of this?
Not on any of the rail issues because I don't have expertise in that area. The only thing I could respond to would be the shoaling issue.
Yeah, I think a lot of the language that you're asking about here, Tom, relates to the fact that it's a joint application that involves the port as well. And long term, those are some of the goals of the port.
Okay. On another, moving along.
Just to revisit one thing, in one of our last meetings, and Angel, I'll ask you to help me with this. I thought that the reference to the Southern California corridors was being edited out of this document.
I believe that was the intent.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think I would advise you to. I think we're talking about adopting in concept, and we can do some wordsmithing in here with individual things unless it conceptually changes the nature of the document. So I think it's important that we listen to Director McDonald's questions, because if he sees it that way, somebody else may.
Yeah, it's easy enough to do.
Yeah. Please proceed.
On project programming request, I think it's a financial page. The page numbers are always, it's one of two that is, excuse me for, anyway. It talks about, or under proposed total project cost, is $38 million, of which I understand $30 million is for rail and 30.2 million is for rail, and 8 point something, whatever the difference is for the port. My question is, where did we get the $30 million number for our part? And specifically, when I looked at there's a March of 2005 strategic plan, which was the last place I saw any itemization of estimated costs that were done by region or by block. The estimated cost at that point in time was $39.9 million, and that was in 2005. And that was in a plan where we were estimating the total cost of the total line to be $125 million. Since then, we've had a revision to that strategic plan that says the total cost is between 125 and 500 million. So at least our total cost is certainly, we've recognized that it's gone up. Why are we only asking for $30 million, or where did we get the $30 million number when previously we've stated that it was going to be $39.9 million to rehabilitate this line?
John, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, we estimated using the actual costs that we've incurred by contract, by function, for example, the roadway contract, or the grade crossing contract, and the estimated cost of the roadway contract. We prepared unit costs based on our actual experience on the south end, and with the repair rehabilitation process, and applied them up here. So I think what the difference is reflecting is the substantial increase in costs that have occurred on the south end project between Lombard and Windsor.
Maybe you misunderstood my point. In 2005, we said it would be $39.9 million. Now we're saying it's only $30 million.
Yeah, well,
that's a decrease in estimates.
It's also a lower volume railroad. So in terms of what you construct to, you try and construct to what the estimated traffic base is going to be. And I don't really know what the estimated traffic base was back in 2002, but I'm satisfied that the 30 million would support the kind of train operations I envision to handle the 6,000 carloads.
I'm curious as to how we came up with this $30 million number. Was Mr. Anderson involved in that?
Sure.
He'd want to comment on it.
Well, he and I both worked on it. Worked it up jointly.
Yes, I worked along with John, and he's absolutely correct. He used numbers from our recent signal contracts, which is a big part of costs involved in rehabbing the railroad. Also, our bridge costs. So we have fairly recent numbers that we used and projected, as John said, a Class 1, Class 2 railroad versus a higher class railroad earlier in 2002 cut.
Thank you.
Do you have any more questions?
Those are kind of the broad-based ones. Probably have a lot more detailed ones, and maybe I can, to the extent that some of them are editorial, I might be able to share them later with Rich if we want to go forward.
I think I'm going to, at this point, see if we can get a motion on the floor. There'll still be an opportunity for comment or questions from the directors, and we'll also invite the public to be involved in this discussion at that point.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we move forward with agenda item G1, H1, which is the application that is spelled out before us with the noted editorial changes that Commissioner Woolley brought up.
Second. You have a second? We'll open it up for further board discussion at this point in time.
I would have thought we would have gone for some public comment before we
No,
vote.
we'll do that after the board comment, that's our practice. And then directors,
Oh, but before we vote.
yes. What I said just a few.
I'd like to reserve a few comments for after the public comment.
You can't plagiarize.
But they might enlighten us.
Certainly they will, I'm sure. Are there any other directors that have a question or a comment?
I guess I don't understand the usual procedure. We are voting now on moving ahead with the item.
We have a motion for public comment.
Right.
We'll be voting in a few minutes after we get the public input and any further directors.
And when is it that the directors can ask questions now or after the public comment?
Both places.
Oh, thank you.
That's, we invited board comment, that's our usual practice, and we invite public comment. And usually there's some interaction with the board before we call the question.
Thank you.
And of course, this information's been in the board packet. I encourage directors to ask technical questions as much as possible ahead of time. I realize that, we get the package out 4 days before the meeting, and that puts a short fuse on it. But by the very nature of this particular application, we live with some pretty strict timelines. So we apologize for rushing you on it. At this time, we would ask for the board to, or the public to comment or ask questions on this. Again, we're getting late, so please make your point. We want to encourage you to do that, but we've got people that are going to be driving in the dark, maybe in the rain, 400 miles.
But you won't be driving through congestion.
Oh, yes, we will. If you have your Santa Rosa Lake.
My name is John Murray, registered civil engineer. Spent 28 years with Humboldt County, a lot of it in the Public Works Department, chasing after our road system. I have a Public Works director before me that was there 25 years. The one that followed me put in 42 years. We all think you're nuts trying to go through the Eel River Canyon. I'm not saying you can't do it.
That's not the motion.
I know, but I just want to give you some background. That you're not going to have that connection, so what you're saying is a standalone project is going to have to stand alone. Now what you have an operator that says, I think I can get 6,000 cars. I think it's going to cost this much. He did not answer commissioner, supervisor, whatever the proper title, Mr. McDonald's thing is, to 100% certainty in my mind, that you're not going to be liable for any loan that he has to take. This, you're asking the public to put in $19 million or whatever here, or half of that amount, because I really can't understand it from what I saw. And here's a quote attributed to Mr. Williams. He also said that there is not enough traffic potential to justify private investment, that public money could allow the adequate operation of the railroad. I don't think the public should have to foot the operation of the railroad. The roads are put in by user fees. You pay your gas tax, you get to drive on the road. The railroad, if it is going to be a private operator, should pay their share. There should not be a public portion in here. So, if you're trying to get to South Fork, which I'm probably one of the few people that know where South Fork is, and then you tell people, well, Dyerville used to be a town there, and it's no longer there. I mean, the project that you just talked about, the trail, I was working with Caltrans when they filled the ditch between the highway. I'm old. If you go to South Fork, you've got two major river crossings, the Van Duzen, main fork of the Eel. You've got a tunnel. You've got the Shively Bluffs. All of this is a nightmare to maintain. As I said before, I was involved in maintaining roads in the Eel River Canyon. I was involved in slides. My 5 years as the Director of Public Works, there were only 9 declared disasters in the county. Intimately involved with FEMA, who have changed the rules. You're not going to get FEMA money even if you're a public entity. You're doing something that I think You really shouldn't. I don't think the staff report is complete. You're trying to change it before you can even vote on it, or you're going to change it after you vote on it. You're going somewhere you shouldn't. And I'm having a big problem with that. And if I sound a little terse and caustic, John will tell you that's just the way I am. Just you can come and talk to me later, and I'm your friend. So,
Thank you for your comments, and just as a matter of record, our contract with our operator does not call for nor allows for any subsidization of operations. I don't know where that quote came from, but it's either out of context or it's incorrect, but just so you know.
okay, then you're saying of operations.
Operations.
Yes, but you are putting in the physical plant on which
That is
you
a
can make
capital
money.
improvement, quite differentiated in
Yes.
accounting or practical.
That's right, but that's still a subsidy.
Call it what you want. Thank you.
And now for a message from your supporters.
We're going to have to really get brief, guys. Please help us with this.
Just to keep it brief, I know we've asked people who are supporters to come, and I know a couple that left already, and most of them have worked for somebody else and can't get it off. Who here is to support this proposal, Timber Heritage Association's excursion train and all that? Okay, good. So in front of you, I believe you have a letter that our board authorized, and it's saying thank you for moving forward with this application 1B. And talking about it from our standpoint, this is what we've been waiting for to move the tourist train forward, and this will help answer some of the people who are saying, well, this might as well chart the tracks and put in the trail, because this is an effort to go forward. And points to be made are that there is a great desire for the excursion train, and from the standpoint that they've been saying, the trail will bring in all this tourist stuff. Actually, the Convention and Visitors Bureau has our excursion train as a very high priority item because it would be the core attraction they could package other tours around. Back in Western Maryland Scenic Railroad, an existing scenic railroad running on a state-owned right-of-way, trails people quietly put together an effort to stop the train and destroy the railroad to have a trail. And when that finally became public, they did a study, and it turns out that you actually have much more benefit with the trail and the train, that you actually have more people using the trail when you have the train running because they actually have an uphill where people take the train. Lots of reasons why you would want to support having the tourist train from many points of view. Also, the draft marine terminal study that's still in process here, it came out very, very favorably for the Timber Heritage Association, saying that the historic Samoa Roundhouse and shops are the highest and best use for those facilities, that our facility would be basically the welcome center for cruise ships, and that the tourist train around the bay historically, that's how when cruise ships came here, they took the train around the bay to get to Eureka. And so, just briefly, and also supporting the freight operator, it'd be very difficult to maintain the tracks for just the tourist train, so we do need the freight operator to be basically the anchor for all this maintenance work. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much for going forward with this, and let's hope we get it.
Thank you, Mark.
Good afternoon. I'm Loretta Eller, the Assistant Executive Director from the Mendocino COG. And we, as a Regional Transportation Planning Agency, have been closely monitoring all the bond funds that were passed in November, the $20 billion program. And this program, as Mitch kind of summarized, $19 million, you're asking for basically, on the low end, it said that the guidelines that the CTC adopted said that there will be $60 million available, on the high end, 80. You're asking for either 1/4 or 1/3 of the money. And I want to say that we think the project's a good project. It's a good conceptual project. However, we feel that your application is weak. And thank you for posting it on your website, making it easily reviewable. And as regional planning staff, we want to help you. And we think that you need to strengthen the application. Just a couple key points. In the guidelines that the CTC adopted under Section 4, there's a statutory mandate that the project has an identified and committed match. The comments that I heard today are really worrisome, especially from your operator that says, we'll see if we can, quote, this was about 15 minutes ago, we'll see if the state's inclined to fund it, then we will apply for the funds from FRA. Well, your own application says that you intend to submit your application in June of '08 for the matching funds. The CTC decision will be in April. So you tell me, if they're looking at applications across the board of committed matching funds and you haven't even applied for your match, I don't think the application is going to go anywhere. And even before you get to the evaluation criteria, in the screening criteria, the number one criteria is there an identified and committed match? Well, you can only do what you can do. You only have so much money. But one way you can strengthen it is certainly apply simultaneously with your application to the bond fund. Do not wait until after the CTC makes their decision, or you will not have a chance. If you were the reviewing body and that were the number one screening criteria, how would you look at it? Secondly, even before you, and that's just before you, before they even look at screening criteria, there's a whole other level of evaluation criteria. And I want to keep my comments technical, but on that list of criteria, it lists several different categories of quantitative criteria, and I believe your application is very weak in that area, and I just ask you to strengthen that. It asks for throughput, it asks for velocity, it asks for specific things, and I'm going to give this to Mitch. It's basically there was no application for this program. You have the adopted guidelines, and then you do your best to match those guidelines. Well, the regional agencies, which were very involved in the CTC meeting that adopted this criteria, they developed a template, which the template just basically goes through the guidelines and say, make sure you cross every T and dot every I. And there are weaknesses that have not been addressed. And I just encourage you to, I understand you have a small staff and they're doing a great job, but you know, I think some areas have been missed. So if you could just go through and the deadline's next week. But whatever you can do to strengthen it, because it's there's not much money. The 4 areas are getting the bulk of the money, 60 to 80 million statewide. You're one little area. The geographic balance is a good point. You need to hammer that point. That's probably going to be your strongest point. So I just ask you to look through, and when you're filling out these grants, you have to cross every T and dot every I, and I think that could be strengthened. Thank you.
I really thank you for that, and I would suggest that perhaps Loretta, if you don't mind, we'll ask the staff to stay very closely with you. There's going to be some things that change technically on this based on the Harbor District's meeting. We've got some editing to do. I think what we're talking about here is the concept, the amount of money, and what the project will be, what's the product of this. And if we can stay focused on that and then make sure we get the input on the things that we can do to mostly strengthen this application, that's the best we can hope for here. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Patty Clary. I work for California Municipal Alternatives to Toxics. I'm here to speak on behalf of that organization and also speak on behalf of Environmental Protection Information Center, who can't be here today. While we don't know what the court will do in the lawsuit of the City of Nevada versus NCRA, in which our organization, EPIC, and Friends of the Eel filed an amicus in support of Nevada. It thus far appears the court says you need to do an overall analysis of the railroad from end to end, and not piecemeal its parts, as it appears you are prepared to do again in violation of CEQA, apparently. You have claimed in court, this is in court documents filed by the NCRA, that you have approved the projects when you authorized applications to the California Transportation Commission, which is what you plan to do today. So apparently you're planning to approve the project, if this is consistent with what you have told the court. Thus, we can assume that today's proceeding, in which you may approve an application, will also mean that you're approving the project. Now, if you're approving the project today, where is your California Environmental Quality Act process? I don't see one. Is there something that I don't see? So, if that is what you're doing, consistent with what you say you do in your court-filed documents, where you are very close to be found in violation of SEQA right now, as the judge has shown in his tentative ruling and in the hearing yesterday. That means if you approve this grant application today, you will be breaking the law again. California Environmental Quality Act is law. Secondly, this is something I don't hear anything from the railroad about, and yet you're very bound by this. Each one of you on this authority faces the prospect of going to jail if you don't pay attention to the second one, and I do not use my words lightly. You have an obligation already with the consent decree that you signed in 1997 with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, the Department of Fish and Game, and the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. The suit was filed by the Attorney General at the time, Bill Lockyer. Consent decree was reached in 1997, which means you are under the oversight of the court, which mandates that you characterize, monitor, and clean up some of the extremely toxic mess that is this railroad from one end to the other. Most of this work has not been done because the railroad has claims they don't have funds. Now, if you seek and receive funds and do not obey the terms of this consent decree, you will be again in violation of the law. Now, earlier today, I heard that you are expecting funds from lease agreements. Those lease agreements funds cannot be used for anything but to fulfill the terms of this consent decree, according to the consent decree. The court could find you in violation quite easily. So I'm submitting to you a couple of letters from Katz and Epic that detail a little further my comments. And I'm also submitting a copy of the consent decree so that perhaps any new members of the authority that may not be aware that they are under the court's order can take a look at it. Okay? Thanks very much.
I prefer that you give that to our legal counsel. Yes, Chris. Chris, do you want to comment on that briefly, please? Again, I don't want to get into a legal battle here, so just...
I will just point out that these comments are in coordination with the City of Novato. Last night at about 6:30, I received a letter from the City Attorney of Novato asserting that NCRA should not take any action on this application without first complying with SEQA. And so it rests upon a characterization of my comments, which several of you were there yesterday, and I don't think that you heard me say anything of the sort. I thought that the letter from the city attorney was sarcastic, but maybe he's really serious, that he thinks that we need to do a SEQA analysis before we apply for a grant application. What he's referring to, and what is being referred to by the speaker, is our notices of exemption, which were premised upon two capital assessment reports that were very thorough, completed by HNCB, where the board is determined to allocate existing TCRP funds in a certain way, and it was not in any sense of the word a grant application as it was characterized by the petitioner and the amici in the Nevada case, but was an allocation of existing grant funds. The point that I was making to the court was that at that point, first in March of 2006 and again in August 2006, this board heard a presentation from HNTV recommending and our project manager recommending a specific course of action in terms of allocation of existing resources, which the board approved. Subsequently, our environmental officer made a determination that the project that was approved was either statutorily in one case or categorically in the other exempt. And the issue became, did the board ever commit itself to a course of action? So when you use the word, when the word is being used as approval, I pointed to the court that on those two occasions, this board took a definite course of action. There was legislative action defining what the authorizing the staff to make the application to the CTC, which governed the allocation of TCRP funds. Completely different situation. And
well, simply to her point that we are breaking the law, can you give me a quick yes or no on that?
you're not breaking the law.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
I'm sure that's the argument the judge heard. The judge is the one who's going to make the decision.
That's not the subject of this discussion.
Hello, I'm Dave Spreen from Neyland, and I've got a couple of documents I'd like to enter for the official record here, and I'm going to read briefly from them.
If you could do it very briefly, we're going to...
No, I'm going to take my full time. I've waited the time, and I'll take it. Thank you. I want to spend a lot of time on it, so I appreciate it.
You'll take 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is from my word on You Need a New Mandate. And I've worked in the freight industry since I got out of HSU in '76. Drove a truck. I used to go up to the old Humboldt loaders. And in the early '80s, when freight was deregulated, we no longer did that. It no longer made business sense. I could order my products out of the Bay Area in the morning, have them delivered by truck in the afternoon, no wear and tear on my people. In 1999, I got involved in business out of China. Wood flooring products coming into the U.S. from China big time. No one would consider our port ever. It's not logistically in a spot that will ever be efficient. All those previous studies have shown that. The governor's veto of your last 2 bills should have shown Mr. Stogner in a new direction. Meanwhile, obtainable economic development by rail banking, the Eureka Arcata section of the rail, is being stymied by the NCRA's adherence to highly improbable, heavily subsidized freight train schemes. The second document I'd like to enter for the record is a letter that's been sent to the Headwaters Board regarding the marine terminal study, which has been used with Headwaters funds. It's appropriate to this discussion because in the 2003 Court of Humboldt Revitalization Plan Executive Summary, it states, the scenarios that include a public general cargo terminal are not recommended because they are not supported by the market analysis. They involve an unreasonably high level of risk. Almost all of the markets that would be involved in public general terminal operations were identified as unattractive in the prioritization analysis, and Humboldt Bay was found to be uncompetitive in most of them as well. The build-it and they will come nature of public general cargo terminals, combined with the short contract terms common in trade, high customer leverage, intense port competition, would result in excess capacity and a level of risk that is not commensurate with the limited market opportunity available. And in conclusion of that letter, I'm going to tell them, and they're going to consider, that in essence the Headwaters Fund grant has been used to put a major industrial project in motion. It not only contradicts the harbor's own previous studies, it contradicts the previous studies, it's not in harmony with prosperity, divides the community, and surely abuses the vision and intent of the Headwaters Fund as well. And you're complicit in that. And it's really time to stop this boondoggle. Those of us who study the issue of marine trade, we know it's a boondoggle. It's time for you really to be ashamed of the way you've presented this to the community. You've got to back off from this application. You've got to think about what you're going to handle with this lawsuit and the entire project and look at your whole direction. Those of you who are claiming that folks like myself are no growth is not true. Your actions are really no growth. You are preventing the doable economic developments that we could do in this community and move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Chris Rawl, I live in Arcata, from Green Wheels. I've looked over this application and the 1B application and have a few concerns. Number one, the grant justification argues for the importance of a connection to the national rail system, whereas the rail improvements proposed are a railroad to the great metropolis of South Fork. It's my understanding that in order to win the grant, the project has to be justified as congestion relief. While there is some congestion in the 4-mile stretch of 101 through Eureka, it's very hard to imagine this railroad to nowhere taking enough trucks off the road to have any effect on Eureka congestion. As intended, it may cause increased rates of gravel extraction, but that's new material that's not taking trucks off the road. Proposition 1B funds are mostly spoken for, as we've heard in earlier discussions today. There's only a few dollars left, and they'll be competitively fought over. A project like this just doesn't jive with common sense, and it just doesn't seem likely to win funding because of that. And we're also concerned, I'm hearing that the decision on the grant is supposed to be in the spring now, but I guess I've heard from other sources that I just don't want to see that kind of dragged on. If the decision isn't made then, if we get rejected then and then just kind of keep hanging on and keep this grant submitted for the next cycle or whatever, that would be a concern. These observations suggest that applying for this grant is a stall tactic to try to neutralize the trail movement. Otherwise, why apply for this rather than continue working to solve the Eel River Canyon challenge? I can't see any other way this nonsensical railroad to nowhere strategy makes any sense except to have some immediate plans for the right-of-way that preclude rail banking, even if those immediate plans are nonsensical and have little chance of success. In the meantime, there is no rail to put the trail next to. There is nothing in the works that has a good shot of bringing rail here, and there has been no decisive move to provide the public with answers to questions of whether rebuilding and maintaining a railroad through the Eel River Canyon is politically, economically, and environmentally feasible. For these reasons, a vote by the board to submit this grant application will be viewed by the pro-trail community as a divisive stall tactic. I apologize for my bluntness, but this has to be said so you understand the way a very large portion of Humboldt's population feels about this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve.
If I could hold it. How
Sure.
many more people want to speak on this?
About half dozen.
6, 7.
Okay, we're going to go for 15 minutes more on this, and then we're going to be through. So be respectful of the people behind you, and because we've got a closed session we have to go into after this meeting. So.
Okay. I'm Pete Nichols, Director of Humboldt Baykeeper, and I'd like to say that first off, I agree with the comments from Epic and Katz that the approval of this application constitutes a violation of CEQA. And to answer Mr. McDonald's question about congestion, the congestion that this project is looking to relieve is basically gravel that the NCRA thinks is congesting our rivers here on the North Coast. I think that may help answer the product question as well as the product of what they want to haul out of here. It seems to me that this proposal is putting the cart before the horse. While this proposal, as written, will have a difficult time meeting the criteria for 1B funding, even if it miraculously does get funded, the work that would commence would be in violation of the impending ruling that's coming down possibly next week in the Nevada case. If that preliminary ruling stands, the complete EIR, as you know, for the 300-mile line will be necessary and will need to encompass this project. I think it may be more prudent at this time for the NCRA board and staff to begin to search for funds to do that EIR through the Eel River Canyon and look at all of the ecological, economic,
and geotechnical problems that they will inquire in the Eel River Canyon. So I encourage you to table this application until that can be figured out. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Tomzak. I'm an Eureka resident, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. A couple of months ago, when the NCRA met here, Hal Burris from Hambro Corporation, which operates Humboldt Flakeport, dropped off a letter to you folks, and which stated, in effect, that approximately 1,200 carloads of pulp material, pulpwood manufactured material, was put on the railroad in its last year of operation. There have been industries that have left this area because of a lack of a railroad and adequate transportation. And by the way, Humboldt Flakeboard ships all of its flakeboard products by truck to Redlands to be put on a railroad. I'm sorry, Reading, okay. I would like to see us do something rather than do nothing. And we've been doing nothing for too long. So let's get positive and let's start doing something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Kellogg from Eureka. One of the often heard complaints or concerns around here, maybe legitimately, is how long the railroad has not operated in this area. From what I understand of this proposal, there's potential product that can be transported, there's potential profit that can be made, there's money that is going to be spent anyway, and if it's possible for that money to come here to this area, I think this is something we need to go for, and to not go for it would be a dereliction of duties.
Thank you very much.
Kristen Lark, Friends of Small Places. We support the comments that were made earlier by Katz, Epic, and Baykeeper. We would request you to table approval of this grant proposal at this time. I was very interested in the comments made by Loretta from the Mendocino Technical with COG. In particular, her quantification portion in this application. There's a it's noted in here that in your application that 6,000 car loads annually would remove 48,000 loaded and empty trucks, but you don't tell us what those trucks are, and I can only surmise from this that it has to do with gravel. And I'd like to point out that most of the gravel that's extracted here is used locally. CHIRT determines what the prescriptive amounts are based on mean annual recruitment, that most of the operators extract the maximum amount that they can. They're up in between the 75 and 100% extraction amounts yearly. There's very little overwintering stockpiling of aggregate material. It's all used locally. So I'd like to know where this additional material is going to come from, where it's going to go. It's used here locally. It's crushed. It's turned into asphalt, concrete. It's used here locally. Now there are old conditional use permits from the mid-70s that are larger cubic yard amounts, and I'm concerned that we are going to see more destruction of our river ecosystems by pressure from the operators to increase the amounts beyond what's feasible and viable through the CHIRT process. Very strong political pressure can be applied by these powerful people. I'm also concerned with the Northwest Pacific the NWP line. I just wanted to make note that Doug Bosco is on that board, and his wife's family owns the gravel line. So, take it as you will, but I've had some dealings with them, and I'm concerned that, that there's something going on there. So, anyway, I would like to ask you to table approval of this grant proposal at this time. Thank you.
Senator Madrone, somebody said they thought the cart was before the horse, and I think actually what's going on is you got the caboose at the front of the train. Think about it. You're trying to run this train down this canyon, pretending like this grant proposal's not tied to this bigger picture, which, it's the elephant in the room. We all know that's exactly what's going on, and you're trying to keep that alive. So really, you're running the caboose at the front of the train, pulling it backwards down this canyon into landslides. when the front of the train and the engine's still looking back at the bay and wanting to do stuff here for the people. And the train, the light rail's down in the south. You know, you got people in your district, in this railroad district that you serve, it's a public facility, that have all kinds of great ideas that they want to do, and you could really be focusing on making all of those things happen. If you would just let go of this foolish idea that you could ever really build a rail, and keep it in place down the Eel River Canyon. So, you know, when I look at this proposal, I'm really curious. You know, one of the directors pointed out that, you know, at your last meeting you had a 7-0 vote directing staff to take care of certain things between that meeting and this meeting. That didn't get done because all the effort got shifted onto this proposal. And I have a question I want to ask. Who directed that shift of staff time? It doesn't seem to me like the directors were aware of it, but please don't take my time to answer the question. After I'm done, if you could answer the question, I'd appreciate it. Because when I look at this proposal, it seems pretty clearly to me, especially with the contractors' comments, that really what we're looking at is a subsidy of public dollars, as John Murray said, for a private person to make some profit. Meanwhile, you have communities that are looking for transportation improvements. So really, let's focus on those transportation improvements and take care of them, because that's where we're really going to get the bang for the buck. I'm a professional grant writer, and I've spent the last 35 years here in Humboldt County writing grants, and I get 9 out of 10 of the grants I submit, and I'm here to give you free advice. This proposal is not going anywhere. You're wasting, as this gentleman, Mr. Colfax, mentioned, very precious and limited staff time. I'm also here to offer you my assistance for free as a professional grant writer to help you write a successful grant to work with staff and make that happen. And it could happen with this funding source or other ones. For instance, this funding source could easily be shifted to this Bay Trail concept, rails with trails. We do, in fact, have congestion in Humboldt County. One person mentioned downtown Eureka, but it is also congested between Arcata and Eureka because of the 2 lanes and the highway system. It's also dangerous. We could reduce congestion on that Eureka to Arcata corridor by helping to remove the non-motorized transportation to a trail, because they're sharing the right-of-way right now, and that creates safety issues and creates increased congestion. So we could argue very well, if we were to build the #1 option that was presented earlier today, rails with trails, take the $38 million or add some T money in there and do what we need to do to build rails and trails around the bay, increasing the levee to 12 feet of height to protect the railroad and the freeway from storm surge and sea level rise, creating a trail facility, and improving your rail facility. If you don't get a grant to fix up your rail bed between Arcata and Eureka, not only has that bed degraded, but with each continuing storm surge and higher tide, you're losing assets rapidly. Once it's overtopped that berm, it continues to degrade quickly. So anyway, I'm here to support. I think it's great you're trying to remove congestion and that you're going after grant funds. It's the wrong place and the wrong application, and you do have free assistance offered to you to be successful in making that happen. So let's support the right proposal in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more speaker.
I recommend that you take time for all the speakers. They took time for you. And I think it is really a gross miscarriage to have a bunch of people who have been kind enough to wait for your comments and to not allow them theirs. Okay. That having been said, my name is Carlos. Excuse me, is my comment time now?
Yes, it is. You got 3 minutes.
My name is Carlos Quilez, also friends of Small Places, resident of Fortuna. I don't have a big pointy legal head, but I certainly am capable of following an argument. You are suggesting that we have a portion of railroad here which is unrelated to the Eel River Canyon Railroad, which is unrelated to the Marin County Railroad, but you are being sued in Marin because the Marin County Railroad is in fact connected to the Eel River Canyon Railroad, but now you're saying it's not connected to this railroad. I don't know if you have such a low opinion of our legal system that you think you could really walk away with that. That, on the face of it, is silly, especially on the grounds that the reason why you're going to build this is to relieve congestion that does not exist. Gentlemen, that's all I need to say.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to your suggestion. I'm going to ask each of the remaining people to take 1 minute so you get a shot at this. Please do not extend it beyond
Hi, I'm Jessica Cuccinelli. I'm from Fortuna. I'm a taxpayer, and I'm fearful that I'm going to have to foot the bill for all of your projects. Somebody mentioned earlier that the port feasibility study did not mention any problems with the rail. That's not true. I read 142 pages of that study along with the appendixes, and they listed a number of studies. I'll just mention a few. We only have a short amount of time. First of all, there's no awareness of the rail or the port whatsoever, thus there are no funders, and if we're going to get funders, that means, I guess, Mr. Lacey here has to, we have to spend money for him to do the marketing, to bring that in. So no money for that. There's also, they mentioned a huge amount of money it would take to restore, demolish, or rebuild the railroad. They wouldn't mention how much that money would be. One can only guess. We've heard billions of dollars, not the millions. Another problem is the amount of money that it would cost. Just the annual maintenance of the rail is a lot of money. They also mentioned that due to floods and mudslides, that would cause even more costs for the rail, not to mention the huge amount of delays that would cause. I'm also worried about the environmental impacts, and frankly, I'm just a little tired of the county ignoring what they really want the train for, and that is to get the gravel out so they can make money, so the gravel companies can make money by selling it to the Bay Area. Thank you very much for allowing me time.
Hello again, I'm Aaron Antrim, and with all the legitimate concerns that have been raised about the actual chances of success for this grant application, citing 48,000 trucks removed from our roads, for example, we've no idea where that number comes from. I have to ask, so what are the NCRA's intentions with this proposal? And again, I have to echo my colleague Chris Rawls' statements, very blunt statements, but just to say, when our constituents come to Green Wheels and ask, so what is the NCRA doing? The only explanation we can come up with right now is that it's, again, some sort of a stall tactic in terms of decisions, grant decisions need to be made, this needs to be made, and we're just pushing decisions further along in order to avoid avoid a really feasible project that county citizens really want. So thank you for hearing my comments.
Okay, this will be our last speaker then.
Sid Berg, again, president of the building trades. I'm also a business representative for the plumbers and steam fitters. This measure before you, as you well know, is not about the Eel River Canyon. It's about infrastructure, and it's about approving money for the funding infrastructure. The infrastructure. Without money, you have no infrastructure, and it's about time we get some of those tax dollars back to Humboldt County instead of spending the billions of dollars in Southern California and the Bay Area that we never get to see. I urge each and every one of you to strongly support this motion. It doesn't hurt to ask. All I can say is no. And if we don't fund infrastructure, we're going to be all drinking out of mud puddles and crapping on buckets. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment period. I'm going to throw it back to the board now. We have a motion on the floor, and if I could just take a second, again, to